You're listening to Experience Imagination, a themed entertainment design podcast presented by Falcon's Creative Group. Every episode, we discuss a new topic with a panel of creative professionals. Hi, I'm Cecil McPurry, President and Chief Creative Officer of Falcons.
Welcome to another episode of Experience Imagination. I'm your moderator, Audrey DeLong. You know, we're right around the corner from Halloween, at least as we record this episode. People in the office are getting excited about celebrating in our own special Falcons way. This ancient holiday goes back many centuries, as you guys might know, and it's evolved into one of America's favorite times of the year, to be honest. Maybe that has to do with the obscene amount of candy we gorge on, or the fact that you can decorate your lawn with ghoulish characters and not look like a serial killer. Personally, I love all the pet costumes, right? I wonder, though, if Fifi really likes her tutu costume, or if she's just humoring you. But anyway, so we're getting close to... Wait. What was that? I swear I just heard something. I think our director of sound is messing with me. Rick, stop it. I guess I can't blame him, though. I mean, after all, scaring people is part of this crazy holiday, too, and one way to do that is with creepy sounds and spooky music. We're going to talk to Rick and Jason Ambler a little bit later in this episode about that and other media-related elements as they pertain to creating the right atmosphere for Scarefest-style attractions. First, though, I'll be speaking with members of our design team about their work on Curse of Dark Castle at Busch Gardens Williamsburg and the Haunted Hotel at IMG Worlds of Adventure in Dubai. Before my head starts to spin with all this talk about the undead, I want to bring in Cecil McPurry, Chief Executive Officer for Falcons Beyond. See, I'm already going there.
Executor.
The executor. Hey, Cecil.
How you doing?
Oh, well, this is like just a really fun episode. It's going to be filled with a lot of goodies. Can we say that? It'll be a real treat for our listeners. We get all those puns in.
I love it.
So we're going to talk about a little bit about Curse of Dark Castle and Haunted Hotel. Do you want to set that up for us a little bit?
Yeah, Curse of Dark Castle was, I think, a major milestone. Obviously for Falcons it was.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I think even for Busch Gardens and SeaWorld in general to have that kind of caliber experience in a regional park.
Yeah.
But for me, it was also a challenge in the sense of what level of scare factor. You know, you have Spooktacular from Disney, which is really geared towards the younger demographics, and you have the really dark stuff for Halloween Horror Nights, etc. And so we had to find that kind of right level of fear factor. And so in our initial efforts, a lot of it was looking at existing films and showing different levels of gruesome versus playful.
Yeah.
And so Falcon's role was to help develop this overarching storyline. And so we came up with different levels in a kind of graphic form in a presentation and try to calibrate what was acceptable. And so that was really a good exercise for us.
Yeah, that sounds really fun.
And when Rick and I were looking at the voice talents too, you know, you have all these different references, but we had to find something that was good presence from an audio standpoint, but I had a personality as well. And so that was one of the bigger successes of the experience for Curse of Dark Castle was the actual sound and voice talent and the execution of that. And then IMG, oh my gosh. I've always, participated in going to Halloween Horror Nights and going through these experiences, and I pride myself in having the medal to kind of go through these experiences. Yes. And Marty is quite the opposite. I have fingernail marks on my arms when we go through because she literally hates that level.
Okay. Well, it's all good. It's all fun. And this is going to be a great party. So when we wrap it up, we look forward to speaking to you at the end.
Awesome. I'm sure the team has some great insights on the metrics of how to do scary.
Joining me now is David Schaefer, Chief Development Officer at Falcons Beyond. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Audrey.
Joe Schaefer, Senior Technical Design Manager at Falcons Creative Group, is here too. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Audrey. Glad to be back.
All right. I'm also happy to welcome Senior Design Director Ken Hardy to the show. Hey, Ken.
Hi, Audrey. It's good to be here for the first time.
Nice. All right. Well, before we get into everything, I want to pick your brains. What scares you the most? David, start with you.
I feel like I have very logical fears. Like I am not afraid of heights unless you like put me someplace that I can actually fall to my death.
Interesting.
So yeah, I think it's a very well thought out fears. So snakes and things like that. Like if they're poisonous, yes, deathly afraid. If they're not, yeah,
High places, pretty easily avoidable.
exactly.
Unless you're in an airplane.
Yep, doesn't bother me. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you're enclosed.
And it has been engineered to be safe.
Right, exactly. Way safer than road travel.
Right. So exactly onto his point, I had a very similar one, and mine is unsecured heights. If you're in a plane, if you're on a coaster, fine. The minute I'm standing by myself and it's my responsibility to not fall off something, no.
Yeah.
All right, Ken.
I have a fear of heights too, but my real fear is I would say fear of the unknown, fear of walking into a dark place where I can't see and I know something's going to happen.
Oh,
That's
so
a
you
good one.
avoid haunted houses.
Yeah. So I know something's coming, I don't know when, and I can't see what it is.
All right, well, I think those are pretty rational fears. So let's talk about Curse of Dark Castle. This is a motion-based 4D dark ride experience that opened at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg in 2005. And like we talked about in our oceaneering episode in August, it did set that new bar for regional parks, right? So what we want to know is Falcon's worked on the story development for that attraction. How did that come to pass, David?
We wanted to create kind of a haunted thrill ride type experience. So in developing the story, we wanted to work with the Busch Gardens team to develop a custom IP that had influences from, the typical kind of hauntings and that kind of look and feel. And I think it fit really well into their overall park offerings. They do a great Halloween event there each year as well. So it was a great complement to that special event, but also it wasn't exclusively for Halloween. So it had the thrill and the fear factor, but certainly something that was all seasons.
Yeah, I mean, this is a nice transition to the Haunted Hotel, which is open year-round. This is an elaborate walkthrough experience filled with horrifying visuals. I mean, you want to look away from them, but you can't. It's really well done all the way around. David, talk to us about the story creation aspects of that project.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting one. It was truly driven from the client. They said, we want to have a true haunted house experience in every sense of the word. Get the shock factor, get the gore factor, get the psychological, fear factor, all of that integrated in there. And so it was a really fun challenge of go crazy, have fun, push it as far as you guys can. And so we came up with kind of this concept for a haunted hotel with a whole backstory that basically as you go make your way from room to room, you're going to experience different types of gruesome and scary environments. And hopefully, by the variation of different things featured there, we're going to strike someone's core fears and really create a crazy time for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Falcon's designed the guest path, right, Joe? So there's various rooms, like David mentioned, that are featured in the experience, but tell us what a guest can expect as they make their way through the maze.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things you can do in a haunted walkthrough is with compression and decompression. A lot of the spaces in the attraction feature very tight, close hallways that lead into more voluminous spaces. And what that does is all the guests end up in a line and are hanging on to whoever's in front of them. And the minute you hit a space that has more area to it, you don't have that same comfort that you can see exactly what's going to happen on either side. So we made sure to vary those types of spaces throughout the attraction so guests never know what's going to come next.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges was to keep the guests moving so that they wouldn't loiter in one space too long. And the solution there was what we called scare them forward. So we would use employees and darkness and lighting to encourage the guests to keep moving forward.
Right. I wanted to talk about show elements. That's just one of the things that brings these types of experiences to life. Joe, walk us through the discussion that the design team had about how best to incorporate those effects.
We had a bunch of practical effects and special effects that are mixed together. We had wall partitions that had stretchable fabric, so people looked like they were coming through the wallpaper at you, but they were more nondescript forms. We had shaking body bags hanging from the ceiling. We had projection map on like a mist curtain that we did later on. And I think The point of all those elements is to create a cohesive sequence and a cohesive scene within each space. It's to add an element of surprise that something you might think is static is not. It's all about just trying to find that balance between the actual actors that are scaring you in the space that you're expecting, and then these other special effects that you aren't expecting because you're not looking for them.
Ken, you were the creative director on Haunted Hotel, correct?
Yes.
So tell us about what your role entailed.
It's creating the story and look development for the overall attraction, making sure that it meets not only the guests' expectations, but also the clients' expectations. The reason that we ended up with a hotel was because of where it physically was located on IMG Boulevard. It sort of made sense that it would be a house or a hotel or something like that. And hotels have been a favorite spot for something horrible to happen
Right.
in a lot of movies and stories and books.
Or motels.
Yeah, or motels like with Hitchcock and The Shining, and there's a lot of reference of really real hotels that have a reputation for being haunted. I think in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, there's the Crescent Hotel. It's supposed to be the most haunted hotel in America, and they actually say use the cliche, you check in but you don't check out.
Oh, man.
That type of thing. So,
All right, I'm making a note to visit this place.
right.
Not. Let's talk about lighting. The lighting design must have been a key element in creating the right mood for this, what I call a creep fest. Can you talk about some of the things that had to be considered in that area?
Yeah, I mean, lighting on any type of haunted experience obviously plays a really important role. And as everyone can imagine, you got to keep the spaces rather dark so you have the element of surprise and the creep factor. You got to have lighting creating the mood of the space, but it's like such a fraction of the intensity that you need. It's so easy to quickly be at a lighting level that's just too bright, and all of a sudden you see too much. So it's like we developed the lighting design to kind of create the appropriate environment with the wall sconces and different things like that would be featured in the hotel. But I mean, I remember during programming, they're set at like 2-3% brightness, so incredibly low, because what you really want is you kind of want to see the point source of the light. So you see the fixture on the wall, but you don't really want to light up the room. So even some of the media and projected effects too starts to brighten up the environment. So controlling light is really, really tricky and important. And so you got to start thinking about surface finishes and things like that. Make sure the floors are painted dark and the ceiling so you don't have, reflections and things like that just allows the light to bounce around the spaces.
And this type of attraction, light is actually part of the story, and we use it to direct a guest's attention to the areas that we want them to see at any given time.
Right. So to wrap up this segment, I want to ask each of you, what was your favorite part about working on Haunted Hotel? Let's start with you, Joe.
This attraction's special to me because it was the very first thing I worked on. It was kind of my introduction to falcons, and it was kind of my introduction to the field. So as ridiculous as it is for such a gruesome thing to hold a special place in your heart.
You sicko.
It certainly does. This is one of the most popular attractions in the park. Even on the slower days, there is a line for this attraction. People just love it.
Yeah, I can see why.
Typically, when we record talent, we go find professional actors and such. But given this case, it was quick scares. So again, we had the freedom to kind of have some fun with it. And so we had some of our own employees and even friends and family members actually dress up and be our talent for the live shoot. So I know even Cecil's daughter, Keneilani, was all dolled up in makeup and got to be part of the live shoot. And so, I mean, I think that's pretty cool that here's an attraction, halfway around the world that actually features some of our employees in the media content.
That is a cool fact. I love that. Ken?
As creative director, you end up putting your hand on a lot of different areas of the attraction and touching a little bit of everything, so to speak. But I did the set design for the lobby when you first walk into the hotel, and also the Gothic ruins and graveyard.
Perfect. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us to talk about these attractions, Joe, David, and Ken.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I have the pleasure of welcoming back to the podcast Jason Ambler, president of digital media for Falcons Beyond. Hi, Jason.
Yes, happy to be here.
And also joining us is Rick Morris, our director of sound.
Hello, Audrey.
Ooh,
Okay.
scary.
It's a deep voice challenge. Okay. You know what? I want to start with Rick because we talked a little bit about Curse at Dark Castle on the design side in the last segment. But from an audio's perspective, I know it was a while ago, but you did the sound design for that ride. And that was such a big component of the overall guest experience. So tell us about that.
That was a really cool ride. And in a way, it was almost ahead of its time. The one thing that really helped a lot with that ride was that we were able to have perfect sync between the onboard vehicle speakers and offboard. So that allowed us, with all the 3D effects that were going on and everything, for instance, if arrows were being shot at you or spears being thrown at you, you would hear the whoosh start from offboard, but then you would hear the impacts hit right behind your head onboard. So because of Oceaneering's vehicles, which was kind of unheard of at the time, was to have the perfect sync between the two. And that made a huge effect to be able to just get really cool effects in right with you. That was one of the things I remember the most. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and also for the hotel. I mean, I'm sure that was a blast to do the sound design for. Did you draw inspiration from a previous professional experience or from something in the pop culture lexicon maybe?
I always do. I mean, I always remember sounds that work and that have always worked in the past. I never use exactly the same thing over. But most of the time in general, I take inspiration from just what my first gut impression is. And that's looking at key art and our artist renderings of what the scene is. And almost immediately in my head, I have a sound, and then I have to work out how to achieve that sound. So usually the inspiration is actually from the art that I'm seeing from the beginning.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Foley too, because when Foley artists create sound effects, they sometimes use surprising items, that you wouldn't think about to get the result you're looking for. Do you remember any favorites that you had for the hotel?
I think one of my favorites is Jell-O.
Yeah? Squishy, right?
If you cook up some Jell-O, and then once you start getting your hands in it, it changes over time because it starts to get more watery as it kind of breaks down. And you can get these really, I think I have it labeled as eating guts on the sound effects library now. So just when you get your hands in there and you start working with it and you hear the goo coming out of your fingers and you have a real close mic on it, it's pretty disturbing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were a lot of different rooms in the experience. I mean, sound played a big role in all of them. Was there a specific room that was super challenging, maybe?
Probably the most challenging was to make something sound like it was coming from inside of a wall. And they did have speakers that were inside the wall, but just to get that sound as if somebody's actually behind there scratching and clawing to try to get out. And it was a challenge, but it turned out really, really well. I mean, it was pretty believable by the time we were done.
Yeah, the hair is kind of standing on my arms right now, just thinking about how spooky this is. But I want to go over to Jason and talk about the overall immersion of the media and how spooky and scary it was. I mean, did the client say like, well, we don't really want to make it too scary, or because it's more adult driven, we want to scare the hell out of people. We don't care how high that bar is set.
There was no bar. I think the goal was to be dialed up to 11, like anything else we were doing for that park, which was IMG Worlds of Adventure. Everything was kind of dialed to the max, and whatever the goals of that particular attraction were kind of, pushed full force. So in the case of the Haunted Hotel, it was how scary can we get without, breaking any laws or putting anyone in danger. Was essentially the only restriction, right? We didn't want, obviously, anybody to get hurt or, to be traumatized for life. But then again, there are some things in there that are just totally outrageous. And we had conversations about the fact that this was going into a park in Dubai and what the sensitivities were. But really, when it comes to violence and gore, there's really no threshold there. And so we tried very hard. And Rick and I spent many, many hours working in the attraction. And it was kind of weird because there weren't, at that point, a lot of other people working in there. And it was pretty dark, and there wasn't a lot of show lights or even anything there. So it was really spooky just being there. I mean, that's how I knew, even as we were programming it, that we had a good base to start from. Was, our team that designed the attraction did a tremendous job, and the scenic execution of it was also very strong, where just being in that space and doing the programming before you had all the show elements brought together, it was already pretty spooky and pretty eerie, and you kind of felt uncomfortable being there as it was. I think Rick could say the same.
Oh, yeah. Even with the work lights on, which are just full up bright lights,
Yeah.
that room where the bodies were hanging, I do remember one time we were still on generator power before they switched over to the main power grid. And when I'm working on the sounds and everything and have all this creepy stuff going on, there's still workers in there, doing finalized construction and that kind of thing. All of a sudden, the lights go out and you still hear all these sounds. And it was freaking out the workers. You could hear the panic starting to come in their voices. And they would try to make their way out because they couldn't take it. They couldn't be in there.
Nice.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting environment. I mean, you kind of felt like you were in a actual haunted place.
Yeah, when I was doing the research for this story, I read that you don't want to like constantly be at peak level of scare. You want to have these like dips and valleys and then like highs and lows, like that kind of thing where you're not constantly trying to scare someone. So on the media side, how did that play in?
Just like any good horror story, you want to build suspense. Sometimes it's scarier to think something may happen than when it actually does happen. And if you can kind of channel that and create a sense of ongoing suspense and anxiety, that's ultimately what carries people through the attraction very well. It's not always about just someone jumping out at you every 5 seconds. It's about when and where, and it's the anticipation.
So the media team, I know they had their hands full with all the digital trickery in the haunted walkthrough, but Jason, tell us what some of the more challenging efforts might have been on that.
Probably the biggest overall challenge. How do you take content and make it feel dangerous to you? Make it feel like it's a threat to you. So that was kind of the trick that we had to do in applying content. And I think same goes with the audio design as well that Rick was a part of. So how do you take those elements and actually give a sense of peril, a sense of fear? And just going back to what you'd said earlier about kind of the peaks and valleys, I think in a lot of ways we were applying that same logic to our content. So it's creating that sense of what's going to happen next that I think is really potent.
A really great example of that is the elevator. When I first started working on that, I just had a timing sheet of how long the elevator was supposed to apparently go down. And a timing thing is like, we want the elevator to feel like it's starting to go and then it suddenly stops and something's wrong with it. Something's breaking. And then we want it to kind of jerk a little bit again and then stop and then let go, like you're actually going to be falling. So I did a temp track just to give them something to work with on site, with the full intention of when I got on site to basically redesign the whole thing. And it was like just about everything in that temp track was working great. When we got on site, I think the only thing I had to manipulate a little bit was the floor shakers, the butt kickers in the floor, to change the frequency to make it feel like you're really moving. But it was one of those times where it was just already terrifying because they programmed the lights and everything else in the elevator to work exactly with the sound. And it was such a great illusion that just worked so well.
To be honest with you, it was very, very simple, relatively affordable technology that was done. But I think Rick gravitates to that area too. I as well think it was very, very successful for what we had, which were butt kickers, they call them, in the ground. And then we had some LED string lights going up the walls that we actually used to create the sense of movement. So we kind of pulsed those going up. And then there was a chandelier, I think, in that room, and maybe and then the gauges for the elevator. And we used all of those things and kind of messed with the timing and how things would flicker on and off. And then there was a period of time where just the whole room went black. So we tried to create these really potent moments. Again, giving you a sense of peril, I think, is important. You know, everyone that's gone through it comes out and they say, I was genuinely scared. That's the goal.
Yeah. So speaking of things that scare people, before we go, I want to ask you guys, we'll start with Rick. Is there a movie that you like to watch on Halloween? Is there something that scares you in real life? What really ticks the box for Rick Morris?
Well, actually, I'm one of those that doesn't like to be scared. I typically stay away from horror films as far as the blood and the gore and just slasher movies. I don't watch those at all. And I'm not even into Halloween because I just don't care for it. But as far as a movie, I like more thrillers. And probably the closest thing to horror that I've seen that I actually really enjoyed was a movie called The Quiet Place.
Yeah, with Emily Blunt.
Yes. Somebody turned me on to that saying, hey, this movie is the best sound design I've ever heard. And I thought they were joking because it's like, it's called A Quiet Place. They have to be completely quiet or this thing is going to find them. And when I watched it, it's like, they were actually telling the truth. I mean, it was brilliantly done with not using sound, but using sound to portray that. Every little sound was enhanced
Right.
if there was a sound. So I thought it was just really, really well done.
All right. Well, that's a good one, Rick. Jason, what about you?
I'm with Rick. I don't really care for, or seek out super scary movies and whatnot. Honestly, I think it's because I get so involved and immersed that it's hard to watch. Halloween movies that I think I've always gravitated to and are a staple in my household. One with unequivocally Rocky Horror Picture Show is
Definitely.
something that we watch in our house every Halloween.
Yeah.
And now, since I've been a father for a few years, the new tradition is we do watch Nightmare Before Christmas as well, which I would definitely say is a Halloween movie, not a Christmas movie. Even though Christmas is in the title, it's still a Halloween movie to me.
Well, all right, guys. Appreciate you joining me for this conversation. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
And Rick, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Cecil, welcome back to the table. Did those conversations give you the right kind of chill bumps?
Yeah. What was interesting is that, a lot of people don't get the insight of the behind the scenes and how to do this stuff. It was popular in DVD era where people can actually see the deconstruction of how films are made.
Yes.
This insight on how attractions are done, especially this specific medium. When you go through this experience, you don't realize that the actors have a corridor that is equally as profound as a maze in this experience that allows the same person that was in scene 1 scare can be in scene 3 scare,
Right.
Because you can't have so much operational overhead that it doesn't make sense, right? So you have to be clever about how the back of house is to allow the infrastructure to play to your benefits. And the whole compression and uncompression layer process, it's really intriguing. And when you're doing it, you find these kind of golden nuggets of storytelling mediums in environmental storytelling, and it's literally applied here so effectively.
Yeah, so many elements had to come together to make it as immersive as it is. All right, Cecil, thank you so much for wrapping this one up.
You bet. Thanks. This was really fun to listen to.
All right, that does it for our Halloween episode of Experience Imagination. Thank you to all of our guests, David Schaefer, Joe Schaefer, Ken Hardy, Jason Ambler, and Rick Morris. And a special thank you to all of our listeners. Happy hunting, happy carving, happy trick-or-treating, or whatever else you do to celebrate. Please join us next month.
Thank you for listening to Experience Imagination, a Falcons Creative Group production. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and share with your friends. To keep up with our latest news, visit us on the web at falconscreativegroup.com and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, please email us at podcast@falconscreativegroup.com.